Welcome to Fierce Queen's Reckoning, and today, we have a story that will make you want to stand up and cheer. Her name was Serena Whitfield, and on the last Tuesday of October, her husband of 6 years handed their company's CFO a set of keys. The keys to Serena's corner office, her reserved parking spot, and, as it turned out, their marriage. While Serena was still sitting at her own desk on the 32nd floor, eating a sandwich she had packed that morning because she never liked wasting money on downtown lunch prices. The CFO's name was Chloe Bastian. She was 27 years old, wore her dark hair in a low ponytail, and had joined Whitfield Crane Technologies 14 months ago with a Harvard MBA and the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. She was also, as of that Tuesday morning, the woman Serena's husband, Richard Crane, had decided he was in love with. Serena did not find out from Richard. She found out because she went to retrieve her car from the underground garage at lunchtime, intending to run an errand to the pharmacy, and discovered that the electronic chip in her key fob no longer opened the security barrier. She stood in the concrete stairwell beside the barrier arm, pressing the button on her fob 3 times, with the particular patience of someone who assumed it was a battery issue. On the 4th press, the parking attendant, a young man named Felix, who had worked the booth for 2 years and could never quite meet Serena's eyes after that day, leaned out of his booth window and told her, very quietly, that her vehicle access had been revoked that morning by an administrative order from the executive floor. Her name, he said, had been removed from the parking registry. Serena looked at him for a moment. She said, "By whom?" Felix looked at his screen. "Mr. Crane," he said. She thanked him. She turned around. She walked back up the concrete stairs, through the lobby, into the elevator, and pressed 32. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor. The receptionist, a woman named Bonnie, who had known Serena for 4 years, looked up and then looked immediately back down at her keyboard, with the focused attention of a woman who wanted, very badly, not to be involved in whatever was about to happen. Enan walked to the end of the hall, past the glass-walled boardroom, past the row of framed patents on the wall, 7 of which bore her signature, to the door of the corner office. The corner office that, 14 months ago, had been her office, until Richard had restructured the executive team and suggested, in the gentlest possible terms, that it made more sense for the CEO to occupy that space. Serena had agreed. She had moved to an equally large office 2 doors down, because she did not care about which direction a room faced. She opened the door without knocking. Richard was seated on the edge of the desk. Her old desk, the one she had chosen herself from a furniture catalog on a Sunday morning in 2019, with his arms crossed, and an expression that suggested he had been waiting for this moment and had rehearsed what he planned to say. Chloe was standing near the window, holding a coffee mug in both hands, wearing Serena's company-issued parking pass on a lanyard around her neck. The physical lanyard. The one with Serena's photo on it, which someone had covered with a strip of white tape and a printed label bearing Chloe's name. It was, Serena would think later, the lanyard that clarified everything. Richard said, "Serena, I was going to call you." Serena looked at him. Then she looked at Chloe. Me. Then she looked at the lanyard. She said, "I see you've been busy." What followed was a conversation that lasted 11 minutes. Richard had clearly prepared for a longer one. He used words like Taraxel and alignment, and where I see my future heading. He explained that he and Chloe had developed feelings that neither of them had anticipated or intended. He explained that he felt it was cleaner, professionally, to consolidate the executive restructuring, alongside the personal transition. He explained that Serena's equity stake in the company, which she had personally grown from a 48% founding share, could be discussed through their respective lawyers, in a way that was fair to everyone. Serena let him finish. Then, she said, "You restructured my parking access before telling me you wanted a divorce." Richard had the grace to look briefly uncomfortable. The administrative team needed to action the access changes for the new Q4 org chart, he said. The timing was this morning, Serena said, before 9 a.m. while I was in the building. There was a silence. Chloe stared into her coffee mug. Serena picked up the small potted succulent she had kept on the windowsill of this office for 3 years, and which had apparently been allowed to remain during the transition. perhaps because no one had noticed it was hers. She tucked it under her arm. "I'll hear from your lawyer then," she said, and she left. She did not take the elevator back down. She took the stairs all the way to the lobby because she needed 32 floors of staircase to think older, to understand what Richard Crane had just done, and more precisely, what he had not understood about what he had just done. You need to know how Whitfield Crane Technologies came to exist. In 2015, Serena Whitfield was 31 years old, finishing a postdoctoral fellowship in materials engineering at the University of Toronto and developing a proprietary thermal regulation system that had applications in everything from electric vehicle batteries to medical-grade cold storage. The technology was hers. The patent filings were hers. The research was funded by a grant from a family trust managed by her father, Gordon Whitfield, who had spent 30 years building a quiet, diversified investment portfolio that touched aerospace components, agricultural logistics, and Canadian commercial real estate, and who remained entirely absent from any public list of wealthy Canadians because he considered visibility a liability. Richard Crane was, at the time, a personable and moderately successful business development consultant with an excellent ability to read a room and a genuine talent for closing deals. He had no engineering background. He had no capital. What he had was energy, a good handshake, and a conviction that Serena's technology needed a commercial partner who could take it to market. He was right about that. Serena knew how to build things. It was less certain that she knew how to sell them. They married in 2018. By then, the company was incorporated and growing. Serena held 48% of the equity. Richard held 32%. The remaining 20% was held by a numbered holding company that appeared in the corporate registry as 147892 Ontario Inc., and which the company's legal filings described simply as a strategic investor. Nobody on the Whitfield Crane executive team had ever met a representative of 147892 Ontario Inc. Their quarterly correspondence went to a post office box in Oakville and was answered by a law firm that gave nothing away. Richard had asked Serena once, early in the company's life, who controlled that holding company. Serena had said, "It's family." Richard had assumed she meant a distant cousin with some savings. He had moved on. He was the sort of man who did not follow up on things that seemed adequately explained. By October of that year, Whitfield Crane Technologies had 63 employees, 2 manufacturing contracts with automotive suppliers, a licensing agreement with a hospital network in British Columbia, and a valuation that a Bay Street analyst had recently estimated, in a report nobody outside the industry read, at somewhere between $80 and $90 million. Richard had used that figure in his pitch to Chloe during their first dinner together, according to the text message thread that Serena's father's security team had flagged to her 4 months ago. At the time, Serena had filed the information quietly and said nothing. She had wanted to be wrong. She had given Richard the particular courtesy of additional time because she had spent 6 years building something with him, and she was not a person who destroyed things quickly. But he had revoked her parking access while she was still in the building, and he had done it before 9 a.m. Serena walked out of the lobby of the Whitfield Crane building on King Street West into the gray October air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The city moved around her. A streetcar went past. Someone on a bicycle rang their bell at a pedestrian. A woman in a yellow raincoat was talking on her phone, laughing at something. Serena reached into her coat pocket and took out her personal phone, not the company-issued device, which she had left on her desk, and opened a contact she had not dialed in 8 months. The contact was listed simply as G. Okafor Legal. The phone rang twice. Ms. Whitfield. The voice that answered belonged to Gwen Okafor, senior counsel at Okafor & Finch, the Toronto-based firm that had represented the Whitfield family's legal interests for 19 years. Gwen was 54 years old, had been called to the Ontario bar in 1998, and had the particular quality of attention that made you feel, the moment she answered, that she had been expecting your call specifically and had already begun thinking about it. "I've been wondering when you'd ring." "He went through with it," Serena said. A pause, not surprise. Something more like acknowledgement. "When?" "This morning. He restructured my parking access and then told me in person an hour ago." He mentioned lawyers. Did he name a firm? He didn't get that specific. He will. Gwen's voice had the level quality of water finding its own surface. Are you somewhere you can talk? Serena looked up the street, found a coffee shop on the corner with a window seat that was empty, and said yes. Will. Then walk somewhere warm. Gwen said, and let's talk about what we're going to do. What they did, over the next 4 hours, was precise and sequential, and it began with a single question Gwen asked before they discussed anything else. Before we proceed, Gwen said, settling into her chair across from Serena in the coffee shop, a legal pad open in front of her, and a pen in her hand. I need you to tell me what outcome you want. Not what's fair. Not what you're entitled to, but you want. Serena wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Outside, the October light was thinning into the particular flat gray of a Toronto afternoon that has decided it's closer to evening than it has any right to be. I want the company, she said, and I want him to understand exactly what he had. Gwen wrote something on the pad. All right, she said. Bull. Let's start with the holding company. The first thing Gwen did, after their meeting, was place a call to the firm that administered 1147892 Ontario Inc., which was, of course, a Whitfield family vehicle, established by Serena's father at incorporation, specifically for this contingency, and which carried not 20% of Whitfield Crane equity but, through a secondary convertible instrument that Richard's original lawyers had apparently not read carefully enough, the right to convert that stake to a controlling position under specific conditions. One of those conditions was a unilateral attempt by either founding partner to restructure executive authority without shareholder consent, which was, as it happened, precisely what Richard had done that morning when he filed the Q4 organizational amendment removing Serena from the executive registry. The conversion was triggered at 3:47 that afternoon. The second thing Gwen did was contact the company's independent board member, a retired engineer named Howard Flett, who sat on 3 technology boards and had been appointed to Whitfield Cranes at Gordon Whitfield's suggestion 4 years ago. Howard was a quiet man who read every document he was given and had the particular stubbornness of someone who had spent 40 years being right about load-bearing calculations. He called an emergency board session for 6 p.m. The third thing Gwen did was file, through a separate counsel, a preservation order on all corporate financial records, which froze Richard's ability to authorize any transactions over $10,000, pending a shareholder dispute review. This was significant because, as Gwen explained to Serena over a second coffee, the financial forensics team her firm had engaged 4 months ago, at Serena's quiet private instruction, following the flagged text message thread, had identified a pattern of expense account irregularities suggesting that Richard had been routing approximately $16,000 a month through a vendor account belonging to a consulting firm that, when traced, had been incorporated the previous January at an address that turned out to be Chloe Bastien's personal condominium. He was billing the company for her, Serena said, not as a question. He was billing the company for dinners, hotel stays, and what appeared to be deposits toward a condo in Westmount, Gwen said. Montreal, she added, in case Serena hadn't placed it. It appears he was planning a relocation. Serena looked out the coffee shop window at King Street. A man was walking a very large dog that seemed entirely unbothered by the cold. He was going to take the company valuation, she said, use it to buy her out of a federal investigation exposure, move to Montreal, and leave me with a legal bill. Gwen did not insult her by softening it. That's what the documents suggest, yes. Serena nodded slowly. She thought about the 7 patents on the wall of the 32nd floor hallway. She thought about the thermal regulation system she had built in a university lab at the age of 30 with a grant and 2 graduate students and a lot of bad coffee. She thought about Richard at the furniture catalog on that Sunday morning, pointing at the desk and saying, "That one. It makes a statement." Trigger everything, she said. By 6 p.m., when the emergency board session convened via video call, Richard Crane had not yet been informed that a meeting was taking place. He was, according to the building's access logs, still on the 32nd floor, having taken Chloe to dinner at a restaurant 4 blocks away and returned to the office at 5:15, presumably to feel comfortable in a space he had spent the day believing was entirely his. Howard Flett opened the meeting, noted the conversion of the holding company stake, confirmed that 1147892, Ontario Inc., now represented a controlling 58% shareholder position in Whitfield Crane Technologies, and moved immediately to the matter of executive authority. The board resolution passed in 11 minutes. Richard Crane was removed as CEO effective immediately. His signing authority was suspended, and his company-issued devices were remotely wiped and deactivated. The corporate bank accounts linked to his sole authorization were frozen. The vendor account connected to Chloe Bastien's condo address was flagged to the company's external auditors, and through a separate notification Gwen's office had prepared to the Canada Revenue Agency. Chloe's employment contract was reviewed for the clause, standard in executive agreements, that terminated her position with cause in the event of financial misconduct by a related party. It applied. Her termination letter was prepared for delivery the following morning. At 7:12 p.m. Richard's corporate phone, the one he was using to draft what appeared to be a message to a real estate agent in Westmount, went dark in his hand. Serena knew the exact moment because Howard texted her a single word. Sitting in her car, her personal car, a practical blue Subaru that she had driven herself to a friend's driveway 4 blocks from the office, where she had been parked since 5 o'clock, too steady to go home and too deliberate to leave. She looked at Howard's message. She looked out the windshield at the quiet street. The October dark had settled in fully by now, and the neighborhood was the kind of residential block where people turned their porch lights on early, and the maples still held most of their leaves. She did not feel triumphant. She felt, more precisely, like a load-bearing wall that had been under pressure for a very long time and had just been permitted to simply stand. She drove back to the office at 7:30. She used the parking garage fob that Gwen's assistant had couriered to her at 4 p.m., issued under the new executive authorization. The barrier arm rose without hesitation. She parked in the spot that had been reassigned to Chloe that morning and took the elevator to 32. The floor was dim, the overhead fluorescents on their evening setting, the city lights coming in through the glass in long orange strips. Richard was standing in the hallway outside the corner office, in his coat, with his laptop bag over his shoulder and his corporate phone in his hand, dead, the screen black. He was talking to Bonnie, who was still at her desk, because Bonnie stayed late on Tuesdays, and also because she had clearly decided that she was not leaving before this was resolved. Richard saw Serena come off the elevator. Something moved across his face that she had not seen there before. It was the particular expression of a man who has just understood that he fundamentally miscalculated the dimensions of the room he was standing in. "My access isn't working," he said. "I know," Serena said. "My phone is dead." "Yes." He looked at her for a moment. The laptop bag slipped slightly off his shoulder, and he caught it with the mechanical reflex of someone whose body was still functioning while their mind was somewhere else entirely. "What did you do?" Serena considered the question. "The board held an emergency session this evening," she said. Howard Flett chaired it. "There's a controlling shareholder position that was triggered this afternoon by the organizational amendment you filed this morning. You would have known about it if you'd read the original incorporation documents carefully." She paused. "I assume your lawyers didn't flag it." Richard's jaw tightened. "That holding company is my father's," Serena said. "It's always been my father's. It was established at incorporation. You knew," I said, "it was family." The silence between them had a particular quality. Not loud, just complete. "The vendor account associated with Ms. Bastien's address in Montreal has been flagged to the auditors and to CRA, Serena said. "Gwen Okafor's office will be in contact with whatever firm you retain. You should do that soon. Tonight, preferably." She looked at his laptop bag. "You can keep the bag, linear. The laptop inside has been wiped, but the bag is yours personally." "I'm not interested in your bag." She walked past him down the hallway to the corner office, the room with the desk she had chosen, the 7 patents on the wall outside, the view of the lake on a clear day when the smog lifted, and opened the door. "Richard," she said, without turning around. She heard him. "Stop. You told me this morning that the timing of the parking access was administrative," she said. "That it was about the Q4 org chart." She finally turned. He was standing in the hallway, his face looking older than it had that morning, the way a face does when something architectural gives way beneath it. You restructured my access before you spoke to me. Before 9 a.m., while I was in the building eating a sandwich at my desk. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. I want you're talking to your lawyer when you're talking to your lawyer about what was reasonable and what wasn't. She went into the office and closed the door. She stood there in the dark for a long moment, the city lights coming in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the lake a flat black line at the horizon. Then she set her coat on the back of the chair. Her chair. The one she had let someone else occupy for 14 months in the interest of keeping the peace. And sat down. She opened her laptop. She had work to do. Outside in the hallway, she heard the sound of the elevator arriving. She heard Richard step into it. She heard the doors close. Bonnie knocked softly on the office door a few minutes later and asked if Serena wanted a coffee. Serena said yes. She said thank you. She said Bonnie could go home after that. What Richard Crane never understood, what men like Richard so consistently fail to understand, is that the kind of woman who packs her own lunch and drives a practical car and lets you have the room with the better view is not doing those things because she doesn't know her own worth. She's doing them because she has decided, deliberately, that her worth doesn't require the window, the parking access. That was what finished it, not the affair, which she had known about for 4 months and had been gathering herself around like weather gathering before a storm. The affair was a human failure, and Serena understood human failures. She had made her own. But to revoke her access to her own company's parking garage, at the administrative level, before telling her to her face that he wanted out, that was the act of a man who had looked at her for 6 years and decided she was furniture. She had built the thing he was trying to take. She had built it in a university lab with a grant and 2 graduate students and a notebook she still had in a box in her home office. The company bore his name in the title because he had asked her, once, early in earnest, if they could build it together, and she had said yes because she had believed him. She had spent 6 years believing him. The succulent on the windowsill of the old office was still under her arm when she'd walked out at noon. She set it on the corner of the desk now, under the window, where it would get the morning light. Some things, she thought, you just bring with you.